People who moved out of the parents' house before 30, how? My dad died when I was 17 and my stepmom kicked me out. Sink or swim, baby. All that aside, I don't think there's any shame in staying with your family in this economy as long as you're contributing. Communal living is going to be the new norm. I moved out at 19. My mom and stepdad moved to the other end of the town because rent was a lot cheaper. But I didn't want to live there, so I looked for a small cheap flat. Found one, had a job, some savings. Somehow it worked out. Eventually found some used furniture and a new bed. Life was much cheaper like 15 years ago. I moved out at 18, got a job as a waiter working 50 to 60 hours, rented the smallest room in a shit area of the city I lived in. It is what it is. Living frugally. I couldn't afford consoles, I couldn't afford TV. Even my cell was a used unit I got for cheap. All I could afford was food, rent and basic utilities. But that leaves a lot of time for work. So I work. It's not fun. Now I am better off, so I am enjoying myself with things I never had in my youth. So pardon this 40-plus-year-old nearing 50 dude that still watches cartoons and plays video games. This was early 2010s. Job. Accepted that the life I wanted to have versus what I could afford were two very different things. X. Knowing that 2.5k downtown loft apartment was probably not the best decision when I could find a rundown, but entirely livable 1BR for $900. Going out each weekend is fun, but 99-cent rental from Redbox was fun enough and cheap. Lots of living within my means. Note, I can't say all this without acknowledging this gets harder to do each year because literally nothing is cheap anymore. Got kicked out at 14. Finished high school sleeping on friends' couches while serving tables. Had a ton of roommates for the next 10 years. At any given time I was living with like 3 or 4 people, it was never boring, haha. The year was 1999 and 4 of us split the $600/mo rent. Good times. No fucking clue how you can do it today, but I remember my dad saying the same thing to me about buying a house and I now have to. Still, I'd advise you to start with roommates. Worst case, you'll be like me and realize you hate living with other people and thus strive to avoid prison. My roommate owns his house, but it was his grandfather's and he grew up here. Neither one of us is an adult, we just have low standards. I eat Walmart canned vegetables for lunch and don't go anywhere or do anything. Just work and tread water and watch pirated anime. Sheer will and determination not to move back in with my parents. Jobs, roommates, frugal living. Don't get me wrong, my parents are awesome people. But I'm an adult and when I turned 18, as the last kid, it was time for them to have their lives. They'd welcome me back even now in my 30s if I needed it, but it isn't fair to them. And so my determination to give them their privacy and lives keeps me from doing so. Are you serious? It's called work. Go find a job, work for crap pay, save your money, stop buying the latest iPhone or anything Apple for that matter. Don't go buy a brand new car, buy a used car, it doesn't need to be pretty. And save up first, last and deposit plus 2 more months worth of rent, then start the grind to find your first dump to live in. You should have done this by your 19th birthday if not sooner. In most states you can start working at 16, even younger in some states. That's not including under-the-table jobs working for old man farmer out in a field somewhere at 10 years old. I left for college at 17 with a massive scholarship and worked my ass off throughout and after college to avoid returning to my hometown and memories of abuse there. It seems like a lot of people here moved out in a sink or swim scenario. If you're able to take your time, it may be a luxury. Well, sometimes it's cultural. Sometimes people are kicked out. Some are forced to stay and help. Some ended up staying forever. No shame. Life is what you make it. I moved out at 24 after attending university with a gap year. Lived on campus. Moved to the city and lived with roommates I had just met. Lived paycheck to paycheck. Loved every minute. Then hustled for a new career with training while juggling jobs. Then switched careers and moved up the ladder. Get a roommate. I never understand people's beef with roomies. You already have the worst form of roommates, living with family. Those roommates actually can kick you out and tell you what to do. I was 19 and went to the cities on my own. I learned how to survive, not necessarily thrive, but I was young. 41 and I'm still living with my dad. I was scammed in my 20s, disabled in my 30s. So life's been shit. Pure determination. I came from a loving household but was itching to leave from quite young. Eventually you scrape together enough funds to convince someone to rent a place to you and say fuck it. With a low-paying job you just have to throw shit at the wall and refuse to let it not stick. I was kicked out at 18. I had to work or be homeless. Best thing that ever happened to me. It taught me to work hard and appreciate everything I have now. It's amazing what's possible when we have no choice but to sink or swim. 1. Go to college at 18. 2. Get an academic scholarship that helps pay costs. 3. Stay in dorms/apartments with roommates. 4. Get degree, or degrees. 5. Get a job. 6. Rent for a while, save $. 7. Buy a house. If your parents are cool and respect your independence, moving out before you're ready is a scam. Save up and move when you're ready. Bills suck. You're joking, right? 30 is way too fucking old to still be living with your parents. If you were living on your own at some point and then had to move back home, that's another story. But 30. Come on. Packed a bag and walked 5 hours to work. Built a box the next day. Slept in the car park for 6 weeks working all of the overtime. Got my own place and 17 years later I'm struggling just as much as I was then. Got a 40-hour/week steady job, talked a landlord into letting me rent without an immediate first and last month rent set up, worked my tail off on overtime until I could afford a cheap beta car. Only time I ever moved back home, parents have always lived in apartments, was when I got massively injured and couldn't walk for 3 months. Moved back out as soon as I could return to my job. Get a job as a burger flipper and stay in a room for 600/mo. Back then, eat only ramen noodles and strawberry pop-tarts. Don't buy anything else until 2 years later when you get a job as a waitress and make more money from tips. All while getting your degree so you can get a job that pays enough you can afford your own place. I sold my soul to Wall Street. Ironically, I make over $200K and can barely afford the cheapest apartment I found. The housing market is being pile-drived up the arse by institutional investors right now due to how stable it is amidst massive economic turmoil. Joining the military, greatest thing that ever happened to me. Play your cards right, save/invest your money, don't get married or get a girl pregnant until your mid-30s, and it sets you on a path to lifetime success.